What's happening, coaches? Peter here. Hey, I got some awesome questions that came in, so I thought I would share some of my thoughts on these. And one of the questions that I thought was really interesting, and maybe a bit basic, but it's probably worth going over, is how long should coaching sessions be? Now, this can probably vary depending on the type of person that you have and the type of problems that they're dealing with, but the easy answer and then my specific answer are going to probably be a little bit in conflict here. But first of all, I think the coaching sessions need to be as long as they need to be. Now, this is probably an easy way to say it can be anything, but it's actually not. So it really depends on how big of a problem a person is coming in with. For example, if it is simply about trying to get the interest rate down on their credit card, or maybe, how do they go about selling things or finding a side hustle or whatever it might be, you might not need that much time. But there are a lot of times that the problem is complex, and then the underlying root causes of it are also complex, right? So sometimes people will come in and they will have money problems, but they are really wide and nebulous. But what you uncover is that it's not just money problems and spending problems, but it's relationship problems, and those types of things, especially when there are multiple layers of it, can really require a lot of time to do a good job on those and to really serve your customers. That being said, because you don't know, I'm going to give you some of my averages. On average, a coaching session should be budgeted for 1 hour. And I will tell you that at the very beginning of a relationship with a client, that actually can be very tough. So on the very first sessions that I have with people, we will almost always use the hour, even sometimes pressing that hour a little bit. So I try to give myself a little wiggle room on the initial calls or consultations that I have with people, because they are going to usually kind of spill the beans about, how they grew up and what's going on with money and where they're at and some of the external variables that are affecting it and those types of things. And so you have to spend that time really accumulating all of the information, and you're really just usually listening. There's often not a lot of give in those sessions, right? We don't necessarily work on the problems. I'll give some ideas, usually some thoughts on what we will talk about, or some things to think about, or some things to go back and get some more detail on for the next time. But a lot of that time is just capturing that information, inventory, some of the analysis, and what they have that comprises their financial picture. After that, I still schedule an hour for every session, but not every session goes that long. I'll also talk about how I bill on those. But what ends up happening, I think, is that the mistake a lot of new coaches make is that they sell packages and they sell their coaching sessions in 30-minute blocks. And the problem with that is, at the very beginning, that does not give you enough time to build the relationship and the rapport and to do a good inventory of what they've got going on. And so you really need to give yourself the amount of time that you require. Now, some people will say, well, when we get to the 30-minute, I don't really shut it down. The problem with that, and it's not a problem that you're going to have today, but it's a problem that you will have in the future, is that if you tell people you're giving them the 30 minutes and you really give them 45, they get conditioned that they really get 45 minutes. And if you actually have something, whether it's another coaching session or an appointment adjacent to that appointment, you're going to be stuck telling people that you need to turn it off, you need to close the call, or whatever it might be. And so it's going to be very abrupt, and it's going to be an experience change that you can easily avoid by setting up the expectations correct at the beginning. The other big problem with that is that it's going to feel very choppy. So if you only use 30 minutes, you get to some of the diagnostics, and then you have to say, well, I've got some ideas, but we don't have time. Your next 30-minute session is next week. Let's meet then. Again, that's going to feel very choppy. And the big problem with that is you're going to lose the opportunity to demonstrate value in those calls. That is the key thing that is going to keep the clients coming back and keep working with you in the future, is that they feel like after every call that they got value. And if you're chopping it off after the moment where they're telling you about things, and you're only starting to get to, hey, I've got some ideas, if I don't know if you've heard of the debt snowball or whatever you might be bringing up, if you don't have time to get into that, you're going to hang up that phone, and those people on the other end are going to think, well, all I did was talk. And while there was some value in sharing and airing out my grievances about things, I didn't really feel like I got anything for the time that I was paying to this financial coach. And so what you want to do is you want to give yourself as much time as you need, and I think that number is an hour. Now, fast forward here, 3-4 sessions down the road, I have absolutely had sessions that have lasted 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I still budget an hour for those. And what I do is I try to end those calls at the time that it feels appropriate. And if it feels appropriate at 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 40 minutes, that's great, because what I don't want to do is take a 20-minute call and draw it out to 45 minutes or heaven forbid an hour, just because I'm trying to fill that time that they've paid for and that they're going to be billed for. Because now what we've done is, although we think we're adding in things, we're actually decreasing value. When you may have had a great 20-minute session, maybe it was just follow up, maybe they needed to tweak the strategy, bounce those ideas off of you. They got what they needed out of it, and they want to move on to their own life. What they don't necessarily want to do is feel like there was a painful 40 belabored minutes added onto their call. So keep the coaching sessions to the time they need to be, but make sure you cap them at an hour and make sure you budget an hour for them. So don't shortchange people by giving them a short window, and don't just open it up to 2 hours. The other drawback of having times that I advertised over an hour is that they seem like they're going to be really long. Now, I have gone 2 hours, and I will talk about how I bill people in a different video, but I've gone 2 hours because sometimes I haven't had an adjacent appointment or a following appointment. And so I've told people once we reach the hour mark, hey, I don't have another appointment, so we can continue this, especially if we're right in the middle of something. And if they want to, that's great. And I've certainly had people say, hey, I cannot believe that was 2 hours. It felt like 15 minutes. I can't believe we were on the phone for that long. I can't believe we met for that long, or whatever it might be. So if they're getting value from it, it doesn't feel long. It's just like if you enjoy a movie, you're really into it, it doesn't feel long. You could probably do more, which is why they make sequels to movies, right? So you want to be really reverent with the time that you have and deliver as much as you can. But don't shortchange them by making too short of a meeting time, and don't scare them off by advertising a really long meeting time, where even if they'll use it and they find value, they might look at that number, 1.5 hours, 2 hours. That's too long. It's going to be painful. I just don't want to do that. So I've always found that the 1 hour mark is the sweet spot. All right. Good luck. See you later.